Some of you tuned in today because the title is intriguing. Some of you are saying, Pastor Bob, have you gone from Pastor Bob's coffee break to Pastor Bob political news analyst? Not exactly, but I do have some things to share about that. Coming up next on Pastor Bob's Coffee Break. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you have your coffee ready. We've got a lot of things to talk about. Here's the question for today. Dear Pastor Bob, what do you think about the political unrest in our country? Even Christians seem to hate each other if they're members of the opposing political party. I've never heard you talk about politics. That either means that you don't have an opinion, or maybe you're afraid to approach the subject. Can you enlighten us? Well, I will enlighten you. And I do have some things to say, and I do have an opinion. Let's get started. So, the first thing that I understand about politics, and especially these days, is that politics are basically fueled by the news media. Fueled by the news media. It seems like the news media has become judge and jury, and many times they make up the story and then become judge and jury over and over and over again. And their ratings have taken the place of truth, no matter what side of the political fence you're on. And so I don't trust the news media so much, and we've heard a lot of different names for it thrown around, fake news and conspiracy theories and on and on and on. And I wade through all of that and I do my homework. I don't believe what people say. I'm not going to trust a news commentator. I'm going to do my research. But here's the bottom line, and this has to do with the news media, but I'm going to talk about the church with this, and you knew I was getting to that, but I am. And here's the bottom line. This is called the illusory truth effect, or the validity effect, or the truth effect, or the reiteration effect. It's been, all those titles have been used for it, and it's basically the tendency to believe false information to be correct after repeated exposure. When you say something enough times, well, people begin to believe it. I'm going to read something by Adolf Hitler from Mein Kampf. You never thought you'd see that on my program, huh? But this is from the book, and I think it's interesting. Listen. All this was inspired by this principle, which is quite true within itself, that in the big lie there is always a certain force of credibility, because the broad masses of a nation are always more easily corrupted in the deeper strata of their emotional nature than consciously or voluntary. And thus, in the primitive simplicity of their minds, they more readily fall victim to the big lie than the small lie, since they themselves often tell small lies in little matters, but would be ashamed to resort to large-scale falsehoods. It would never come into their heads to fabricate colossal untruths, and they would not believe that others could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously. Even though the facts which prove this to be so may be brought clearly to their minds, they still doubt and waver and will continue to think that there must be some other explanation, for the grossly impudent lie always leaves traces behind it, even after it's been nailed down, a fact which is known to all expert liars in the world and to all who conspire together in the art of lying. He used it very well. And so do a lot of other people, and so do people today. So, are we guilty of doing this same thing in the church? Yes. And by the way, that's all I'm going to say about politics. And I realize that it's a very explosive issue. I have people, you listening to me, who are on both sides of the political fence, and that's okay. But you need to do your homework. That's all I ever say to people. Why are you believing everything? Why do you choose to believe in, for instance, a news network that has to make money? And so if they're starting to have difficulties, they begin to make up the news. A lot of them are doing that. A lot of them are doing that. And we choose to believe a news commentator who has an agenda over really digging into the facts. And when you dig into the facts, you realize that there's a lot of information there that neither side of the political arena, especially the news media, is necessarily giving to you. Everyone has their slants. I don't want to read somebody's slant on something. I want the facts. Just the facts, man. Just the facts. So, anyway, that's all I'm going to say about politics, and I think we have to be responsible. So here's this verse in 1 Peter 4:15 that really kind of lays the foundation for how we deal with this kind of thing. 1 Peter 4:15. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or any sort of criminal or as a mischief maker, a meddler, gossiper in the affairs of others, infringing on their rights. So murderer, thief, criminal, gossiper. Well, all in the same sentence. And why in the world would it list gossiper, meddler, mischief maker in the same context as murderer, thief? Interesting, isn't it? This word meddler is interesting. It's someone who gets involved in other people's affairs. It's an agitator. It's satisfying your own curiosity, or as a person who causes trouble. Might be a critical word about the way someone else does something, the way they dress, the way they talk, the things they believe, the way they raise their family, whatever. It might be a word of gossip. You know, I heard this, and I'm just sharing this as a prayer request. A prayer request many, many times is church lingo for gossip. And or it might be taking sides in a conflict that you don't know anything about, and you believe one side or the other and not necessarily digging for the facts and trying to stay unbiased. It's prying curiosity, and it's a primal thing with most people, wanting to know about what's happening in the private lives of other people. And the church does that all the time. The dangerous thing, though, is that it can easily look like genuine spirituality when it's absolutely the opposite. But here's what happens when we gossip, and I don't think we understand how much murder it actually is. I've been on the other end of gossip before. It's horrible. People say something about you and it starts to spread, and people are believing things about you and I'm thinking, why would they ever believe that about me? And of course there's no evidence. There's somebody who starts a rumor, and a lot of times they're disgruntled or whatever it might be. But more than once I've had this happen to me, and it's heartbreaking. I have spent sleepless nights over gossip that's been against me. And I know what that feels like. And there are people from my past who still don't talk to me because they believed the gossip, or their view of me was tainted because of the gossip. You can never undo gossip. Listen to me. You can never undo it. Even if you're vindicated, the doubt is still there. The damage is never really repaired. You know, even though you say, well, I guess that wasn't true, and I guess everything's okay, in the back of your mind you're thinking, yeah, but I don't know. Because that's the way our mind works. It's never fully erased. That negative thought, that negative feeling, that negative innuendo is never erased. Folks, that's why it's so important to see the church as a body all together, encouraging one another and getting involved in each other's lives in that way. And when you walk beside someone, especially when they fall, your role is not to gossip and talk about them. Your role is directly with them. Help them stand up again. Be kind to them. Be merciful to them. Because all of us stumble and fall at one point or another. And gossip isn't the way to handle it. It's not about that. It's about restoration. So we're going to be talking a lot this week about spiritual gifts. We're going to talk about how the body of Christ fits together, what your role is in it. And if you're not fulfilling your role in the body of Christ, then you are guilty of not helping to lay a foundational safeguard for the church and for the body of Christ as a whole. I know that's a bold statement, but it's true. Every one of us have not just been given spiritual gifts to edify the body of Christ, but we've been given spiritual gifts to lay a foundation and to keep it from crumbling, to keep it from gossip, to keep it from dissension. So when we have church as a building, when people don't get involved with each other, they view it as a spectator sport and go and watch somebody perform on Sunday and then go home. We don't get involved, and the church becomes a place that fosters a lot of this kind of stuff. It fosters disgruntled people. It fosters gossip. It fosters doubts about people. And then, of course, all kinds of lies and pot shots are directed at the pastor. It's a tough role. A few years ago, there was a study done among thousands of pastors from a lot of different denominations in the Christian faith. And they were asked this question: have you in the last 6 months seriously considered leaving the pastorate? In other words, doing something else. 65% said yes. I know. Why? Because it's the hardest job on earth. And this is the number one reason right here. Because we take all the pot shots, we take all the gossip, we take all the disgruntled people. We keep trying to hold all this together when the very foundations are not laid. And the foundations are using our spiritual gifts together, loving each other with glad and sincere hearts, using the church building as only a place to meet and not as what the real church is. Again, our poster for the month. This is a building. This is the church. So when we understand that, it's a whole different animal. So folks, as we begin now to prepare to go back out into the world, to quit quarantine and to begin to engage again, we can't do it the same way. We can't go about it the same way. We have to be change makers. And folks, our society around us, not just the United States, but all over the world, is hurting badly. We're polarized. We're fighting. We're politics and the news media have given us a lot of corruption, a lot of dissension, a lot of hatred for each other, and it's brought into the church. And in the United States, if you're a Democrat and another person's a Republican and you both come into the church, it's enough for fighting. And people don't like each other because they represent the wrong political party. Now, I understand that everybody has good reasons for their convictions. But in my estimation, a whole lot of it is based on truth and news media. And I think people haven't done their homework. But that isn't the point. The point is, have I learned how to love other people in the body of Christ? Have I learned to love them unconditionally? Have I learned to support them? Have I learned to to lay those kinds of foundations? Have I learned to love, love, love? Love God, love others, love you. And that's where we have to be. So folks, that's our subject for this week. The whole month we're talking about God has left the building. We're talking about the church, and we have a lot of things yet to cover. So stay with me every day. Look forward to continuing this tomorrow. And don't forget, you are blessed. So go and be a blessing.